Hey, y'all, good afternoon. Welcome to What War Leaves Behind podcast, episode 2. Today, we're going to talk about Outlaw Platoon by Sean Parnell. We're going to touch base on the FTC framework at the end and then give you a little preview of what's to come this coming up week. All right, so amazing book. I'm so glad I started this whole process with Outlaw Platoon. There's so many nuggets of just awesome information in there. I'll post a link on the show notes and in the article where you can go support Sean and order his book on Amazon, whether it's Kindle, audiobook, hardcover, paperback. He's got it all. I mean, he's got over 10,000 reviews on this thing on just Amazon alone, another 13,000 on Goodreads. I mean, this is awesome. There's no question about why he's where he's at right now because I mean, this is just an amazing book of lessons, right? And so we're still early on in all this. The reason why I launched What War Leaves Behind, one is I love writing, and so getting on here and writing some field notes and writing some debriefs and talking through some things, and then getting to read all these combat memoirs. I've been reading these books forever. I love them. I'm die hard. Like if you're going into combat, you're going into battle, you want to reach back and read lessons from before you and just get as many lessons as possible. And then that even dives into when you're trying to do other things like organizations, businesses, leading small teams, teacher, right? I've taken lessons from these books as a teacher at a middle school. I mean, all these things just help each other out and help us figure out how to just be better, right? And so, um, okay, we're going to dive right into Outlaw Platoon and start talking about some of the things um, that I seen on the pages of these book. Right. So when you first open this thing up, I mean, I'm talking about first starting this book in the prologue. He already hits us with some awesome information and things to think about. Right. So on page 15, and just like my Bible, I do the same thing with all my books. I got highlighter, pen, notes in the pages. I mean, I'm all about the book studies, right? And I've highlighted it had made them hard long ago, and now they wore their calluses like armor, right? And so Sean's sitting at this table. They just had like this day in combat, first starting out, and he's at this table and he's thinking through all the things that just happened. He's thinking through the things he had to do, and he's wondering how it changes him as a man, right? He looks over at this other table, and it's a bunch of sergeants in the army, right? That he knows that are acting like they're not phased, right? And so he's starting to kind of talk through, you know, hey, is this something that happens? Does it get to a point where you've spent so much time in combat and so much time in these scenarios where it just doesn't even affect you no more, right? So if I'm a homesteader and I'm outside every day and working in the fields and working with my animals and 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 doing this for years, my hands can put up with that. My body can put up with that, right? And then if you get someone that is on day one, day two, doing that all day, they're wondering to themselves, "Am I even going to be able to make it through this? Like, is this something that I can do?" And that's just where Sean's at right now. He's thinking, man, these guys have been through the ringer. It's hard to believe that this isn't affecting them. What's wrong with these people? And then he makes this realization of, you know, the things they've been through have built that armor up on these people long ago, and now he's in the process where he's going to be building his own armor, right? And so all of that just pertains to everything in life, right? And so if for instance, if we look back on Carter's journey, if we look back on when Carter first started his journey at 2 years old with a pediatric brain tumor, right? And now he's 17 going on 18. If you'd ask us years ago when this first started about some of the things we go through today, it's just incomprehensible, and so for us who's done this for 17 years, or we've done this for 15 years now, because it started when he was 2. We did this for 15 years, and you take someone who's just starting out in this journey with their child. They're if us and them sat down for an hour to kind of talk through our experiences, imagine the stress you could take away from these people, right? And so, that's just part of all of this, and that's what Sean is starting to realize. Hey, these people have been in my shoes long ago, and now look at them. Is this going to change me? And he's a little bit worried about it, right? The next thing I hit on with that article was how fast leadership comes about, right? And I wrote a note on my Substack last night about this. How people get new management roles and how fearful they are, how stressful they are. They lose nights of sleep. They wonder if they're going to do the right thing. Are they going to make the right decisions? All this stuff, right? And so you hear my dogs barking in there. And so, Sean writes in his book, he writes, I second guessed myself constantly, concealed it from the men, and did my best to absorb every lesson thrown my way. Right. So, what he's trying to say, and it's a huge point for us, is he makes a decision, and then inside his head, he starts to second guess, is that the right decision? Should I have done that? So instead of broaching that topic in front of everybody, he conceals it, and he learns every lesson from those decisions. Right? It's like, go assault that bunker. You guys go assault that bunker, you 4, and we're going to lay down a base of fire and then send a maneuver element this direction to uh, support your adjacent sides and whatnot. Whoa, wait. Maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe this instead. So when you start talking like that, now these people are like, wow, should we really trust this guy? This guy knows what he's talking about. Is he sending us to our death? All right. And so when he starts to second guess himself, he holds that in, and he doesn't let that reflect on his soldiers. And it's the same thing in every concept of everything we do in organizations and businesses, right? If I'm a CEO of a business and I start to second guess myself in front of people, then it starts to get rid of the faith they have in you when we start talking about this FTC concept, right? Instead, there's a huge difference between asking people's opinions, right, and getting their thoughts on a certain thing, than you making a decision and then you constantly changing your mind and changing your decision in front of people, right? So he's a new leader. You have to imagine how this is. When I went in the Marine Corps, I was enlisted, right? And so I went through the ranks, and when I was a young leader, a team leader, I was still really close to my Marines, right? I still lived with them, still lived in the barracks, was around the same age. I've been through a deployment or two, but I still was close in age. And then, as I moved up through the ranks and became a gunny, and you know, the leadership concept kind of changed. Got to imagine that, as this young lieutenant, he's going to college and going through his infantry officer, stuff, all his schools and whatnot, and every school that Sean does, and then eventually he's in charge of these soldiers, both young and old, right? And so he's on his first aspect of leadership, and he's expected to lead these men and make the right decisions and accomplish the mission. So that stress on him has to be just enormous. I can only imagine being in his shoes, right? Like, I've been in positions where I was nervous as a leader. I went to Somalia, to Baldoga, senior list advisor. I obviously was nervous about that, right? Like, that's a big gig and a big thing that I was stressed about. But I had also been in the Marine Corps for 15 years at that point, right? So we're talking about a young lieutenant who is is in this combat zone with his men, and he's expected to do the right thing and make the right decisions and save as many lives as possible. All right, so that's obviously a huge thing for him to work through. Thirdly, the next thing, you probably hear Carter in there running around. The next thing is the courage we often overlook, and this is just a good old fashioned, like, great writing, a great lesson. And I'm not even going to dive too much into it because I want you to experience it the way I did. There's some foreshadowing that I caught on. I also have read a lot of these books, a lot of these combat stories, and so I started to kind of there was some foreshadowing where I knew what was about to happen, and it was about his interpreter Abdul, and it's easy to overlook their stories, right? It's easy to overlook their sacrifices and what they bring to the table in these concepts. And so when Sean writes about him and what happened to him, and then at the end of the book, it circles back on how that all happened and why that happened. It is just a welcomed part of this book of sharing the stories and sacrifices of not just his soldiers, but everybody that was part of his team. And it caught me off guard. I was real emotional about it. I did not, like, I foreshadowed something happening, but I didn't expect the entire aspect of it, and then the circling back at the end of how it happened, right? And it's just very easy, and you never expect who some of these people relate to. When I wrote my first book in 2019, so many messages and calls came in of a character that was just a small part of the book, but everybody just related to him so much. They all loved him. They want to know where he was going to be, where he was in the next book, the next story, and I was shocked. Like, I did not expect people to relate to him so much, and for me, I felt Abdul's story, I felt his sacrifice, and I often look back and think about, is there people who played a role on your team, maybe not the largest role, but have you overlooked them in the past? And is that something that we fix in our future? Um, just a great, great part that I'm glad Sean included it. And yeah. Next is leadership and distance, right? And so this is something that I had struggled with. Did I agree with how Sean did it or not? Um, Again, it's two completely concepts, two completely things from my experience and Nick's experience. Um, I also, this is a book, right? I'm reading a book. I'm not talking with Sean one on one and asking his thoughts and um, getting his interpretation, and maybe confusing my interpretation, right? But when I read the book, I feel like Sean is really, really, really close to his soldiers. I mean, I often think that he considers their families, and he considers, oh, he just got married. Should I send this guy? Um, it's just a lot of thought where there's no doubt he loves his soldiers. Does that delay his decision making? And does that put more lives in danger? I don't know. It's hard. Like, again, this is a book. Me reading a book and a page of him going through certain thoughts could be literally a split second in his head and not affecting it at all. And in the Marine Corps, it's very, like, we're very careful about how personal and professional gets mixed based on these things. Um, for instance, as a staff sergeant or a gunny, like, I don't go out drinking with my Marines. I don't go out partying with my Marines. I'm not staying overnight in the barracks with them. That's just me. Doesn't make anything else right or wrong. No, it's just the way I approached it. I still loved my Marines. I still cared for them and wanted the best thing for them. I just didn't want to delay decision making based on who has more kids or not. And I'm not saying Sean did that. I'm just saying that when I read through the book, I felt like there was a lot of him battling inside what the right decision was based on the personal lives of his soldiers. And it could just be an afterthought or a reflection that he's writing about. And by no means does that encompass him while he's leading in combat. So that's one of the things I, you know, when you read this book, I would love to hear your thoughts. Or if you've already read this book, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your input on professional and personal boundaries. Again, when you're reading a book, it's all personal interpretation. It doesn't mean things are right or wrong. It's just how we interpret it in our heads. We can't. It's kind of like every time we read a book and then watch the movie, it's two completely stories every time. Do we interpret things different within ourselves as we read than what the author intended? And I would say absolutely. Then the last thing of Outlaw Platoon is the fight and the aftermath. This is a fantastic book when it comes to combat stories, when it comes to actually bringing us in the fold of what combat means. I mean, it's just an amazing book of that. Again, I read a lot of these books, and I feel like a lot of the older books always follow the same kind of path, or at least the ones that I read. And a lot of those started back in the day in the Commandant's reading list, reading those books. But I feel like a lot of them follow the same path. First third of the book is them growing up and how their lives were as a kid. The middle of the book is them going to boot camp and getting started in whatever branch they join. And then the end of the book is their fight. And Sean doesn't do that. The entire book is about the fight. And he incorporates things from his past and his childhood and whatnot inside of those, but the entire book is the story of combat, and it really brings home a lot of lessons for young leaders who want to get prepared for leading in combat. They should absolutely study this book. I mean, it should be a Bible study of Outlaw Platoon. I mean, it is so much of it. You got the May 7th attack, the June 10th attack, several other ambushes. They all paint a realistic picture of what kind of enemy they faced in the conditions they fought under, right? And so this is just something that everybody should read and understand and try to put themselves in that position when it comes to the combat stories, right? Another thing is, Sean doesn't hold anything back. He's very courageous in this book when he publishes his personal thoughts and everything that he went through. He doesn't hold anything back or try to hide anything, and he reflects on certain situations of when he used the word fobbit, and he talks about some of the support personnel that aren't out there on the streets going house to house, but they're support personnel, right? And he even includes a letter that he received from one of those people that he served with that were support personnel during his deployment that he didn't really know that much. They still sent him a letter to kind of explain their side of the story. And he even acknowledges that letter and shows us the letter he wrote back to that soldier. And I think that's just a real class act. I think that is a brave and honest thing to do. He's not hiding anything. He's telling us how he felt or how he went through those situations at that time, and then he just shows us what it is, right? And now there's always that disconnect between support personnel and infantry, and there's always that rift that comes through, and I'm glad that Sean addresses it, because that's not just infantry and support, but it's everybody. Every situation you go through, as a teacher in middle school, and then there's support personnel. They're just as important as the teachers. Let these teachers figure out how to do a lot of that stuff on their own without the support personnel there. Or there's the organizations that you go into, and you have the people on the ground, and you have the people who support those. You have your CEO and you have your admin. All of that is intertwined, and you need each other to accomplish the overall mission. And if it wasn't like that, if we didn't need each other, then it wouldn't be there. And we've got years and years and years and years of this, right? And so it's all just like it, it's people are there for a reason, and if they're not, then that's what we need to just kind of work through. And so I love that Sean brought this up, and I know that there's always people battling that within the organizations. I know in every organization or business or things that we work through, there's always a rift between I do more than you, and or I'm more important than you. And I'm glad that it's a topic that we get to talk about in this, and we get to kind of feel our thoughts, right? And so, again, another thing I'd love to hear your thoughts on, um, and kind of see what people's opinions are. Mine's very obvious, right? Like everybody's needed. Everybody mutually supports one another. And so great book from Sean. I love this book. I've got notes all over this book. I mean, it is awesome. I mean, there's points. I try to read 50 pages a day. There's points in this book where um, I could barely put it down. And so I started it before Carter's surgery. We got to Carter's surgery. I read it a little bit in the waiting room while I wasn't, too anxious or whatnot waiting around. I read it when we stayed in the hospital overnight, just a little bit. And then when we got home and Carter was doing a little bit better, I dove, like, there was times 100 pages, I couldn't put it down. Right. And so great story, great book, great information, a must have for your library. I'm absolutely ecstatic that it's in mine. Um, I mean, just kudos to Sean and an amazing written book of lessons, right? And so, last thing I want to kind of touch on is the FTC framework. And me and my team, right? So when I launched Proven Valid Professionals, we helped executives throughout the country with team development and leadership and all that stuff within their organizations. And I had an awesome team. Aubrey Wren is just a, a brother of mine who we worked together at SOI, and just an amazing man, an amazing teacher, and is one of the reasons why I went to teaching after I left the Marine Corps, and we did Proven Valor together, and it's teaching all these executives. And then after we sold that company, I went to teaching at the school, and just an awesome individual who I would put in front of any leader I've ever met anywhere to help your organization get better. And then David Hawes, right? Me and him worked together at Mar Forcom. Super intelligent Marine. He's now a teacher as well, which, now that I think about it, I never put all that together. Like, all of us are just teaching right now. I mean, it's obvious. He outstanding person, outstanding Marine. I'm so glad he's got his master's degree, or yeah, he's got his master's degree, and working through all hidden teaching as well. And he's just a huge portion of what we did at Proven Valor Professionals. And just, I was a gunny, and he was a new Marine at Mar Forcom, and he stood out that much to me that even after the Marine Corps, we still work together. And you know this is the framework that we came up with and we used for these organizations, right? And so FTC is the faith, trust, courage framework, just a leadership philosophy that we use to enhance team dynamic, right? And so, you know, faith is what we need as a leader. Your team has to have faith in you, right? You have to have faith in you that you're doing the right thing, you're making the right decision, you have their best interest in mind, and you're not just out there trying to do all this for your own benefit, right? If I'm in an organization, right, I'm not telling my team to do all this work so I can get a bonus and take the bonus for myself, right? If I'm If I'm in the Marine Corps and I'm trying to win an award, I'm not doing that based on the lives of my Marines. Everything I do has their best interests in mind while accomplishing the mission. That is what we're doing, right? We're not needlessly using people to gain on our own behalf. And I know there's a difference between life or death in a combat situation or career, which is still kind of life or death if you think about it. You know, we're talking about family and careers and paychecks and how they live. Like I know there's a huge difference between those two islands of comparisons, but at the same time, you still have to care for the people you have based on the mission accomplishment. You still have to care and make sure that they're taken care of as well. You want them to do better than you. You want them to take over your job. You want them to do that. And that's what you do as a leader. You make people better. You don't make yourself better. Trust is, instilling that trust and having trust in between all the team members. You got to trust that the people you're working with have your back, your leader and the people who sit beside you, right? I can't go assault a bunker if I don't believe my support by fire is going to do their job. You just won't be able to accomplish it as much as you will if you really believe, hey, they're going to do their part, I'll be fine, right? Everyone needs to trust each other and do their job. That's all there is to it. You have to find ways to instill that trust. You have to make sure that people are on board with that. And then when trust is being broken, you need to jump on that and put that fire out right away and fix it. You have to have trust in each other. And then lastly is the courage, right? Courage to do the hard things, the things that nobody wants to do. Nobody wants to take out the trash. Nobody wants to clean up. Nobody wants to call the angry customers. No one wants to talk to the mad parents. Nobody wants to do that. And once one person starts doing all that stuff and everybody else feels like they don't have to, they've done their part, they're too good for that. Once that happens and resentment builds, once that resentment builds, trust goes away. When trust is broken, the faith disappears. And now everybody is on their own. Everybody is doing whatever they want to get what they can out of the situation before they cut ties. I see it all the time. I see it every day in the organizations we work with. It's just you can spot it and always put it into one of those three categories, and they always lead into each other. Once one's broken, the rest get broken, and everybody's on their own, and then everybody's getting as much as they can before they cut ship and go somewhere else. You have to get those three things under control, and everything else is implied. Okay. And, I'll put a link to the article on there, and I'm also going to be, I'll be dropping a one-page kind of PDF download that people can use for their organizations and kind of talk through and with some examples of how to instill trust and how to instill faith and all that stuff. And we'll make it easy for everybody to kind of do just a one-page download. I appreciate you all listening in. I know we've covered a lot. I try to keep it under 30 minutes. I'm taking the video away. It's just easier to get here and talk through and talk through this stuff. Next week or tomorrow I'll be posting my debrief on house to house, and then we got a couple of field notes coming up. We got Carter update on Fridays. We got our sit rep email number 3 going out on Wednesday. Things are going great. I'm having a great time with Substack. I'm having a great time with this publication. We've got lots of people already reaching out, lots of people, communicating with us about, some of these stories and telling us their own. I'm real excited about all this. So I appreciate you all supporting us. If you've not followed the publication to get sit reps to your email, what happens is on Mondays we publish these podcasts. On Tuesdays we do our debrief from a combat memoir. On Wednesdays we send out our sit rep email that kind of tells with links to everything for the week. Thursdays is field notes. Friday is Carter, right? And those aren't things that are being sent to you every day. You only get an email on Wednesday. Wednesday has the links to the podcast, has the links to the debrief, has the links to Carter, has the links to field notes. It's all that in just one email a week, right? Everything else is published on the website. You can come back and look anytime you want, or you can wait for the email. I'm not here to flood your inbox. I'm not here to sell you my books. I'm not here to do any of that. We're here to tell stories, and we're here to do to help us learn lessons from those before us, and that whether it's a battle a battle in combat, a battle on the home front, a battle at work, a battle within yourself, all of this is meant to help us learn from others, get better, and become be a better version of ourselves tomorrow based on lessons that we learned from those from yesterday. So I appreciate y'all's support. Appreciate you all listening in, and we'll send out this next episode on next Monday. Thanks.